Welcome everyone to a demonstration of the at-market lease calculator. The lease calculator should be used in the period after the transition to IFRS 16. So for a typical June year end, if you transition to IFRS 16 on the 30th of June 2020, you would then use the lease calculator for your year end 30 June 2021. Similar to the other models, you should start by reading the user guide and listening to this video. After that, you would move to the time series. And you could see here that the transition year was 2020 in this case. The latest lease date is 2040, and then you put in the last historical month. Now, once again, the last historical month is a critical input for the model to actually work effectively. You're transitioning here for 30 June, or your financial year end here is 30 June 2021. The last historical month should be in the prior year. So in this case, it was June 2020. And that'll become important because when you add in post-transition leases, you'll notice here that these are outgoings in 2021. So in the 2021 year, that's why the historical months need to be in the prior year. So we've set the prior year to June 2020. The next thing you need to do is to import your financial statement transitional journal entries. And so this is a 10 lease model, and this will reference, for instance, this lease here will reference the at-market lease transition model. So you can either use formulas to reference that, and there's some formulas embedded in here, or you can import them manually, i.e. type them in manually. So to type them in manually, you would go to your transitional model, and you can see here that the consolidated lease tab, if you open up the boxes on the left-hand side, it would show you the leases and right of use depreciation go down to all those items. So you take all those items and you input them into this imported financial statement journals tab. And what that does is that sets up this model with whatever your transitional choices were. So in the example we had earlier, in the transition model, we used, for instance, option 1 to transition. So in the lease calculator, all the journal entries are on 1 July 18. If we'd used option 2 or 3, the journal entries would be on 1 July 2019. So that imports all those journals and all the assumptions that you made for the transitional years for 2020 and also the comparative year 2019. You won't need to put in any historical lease assumptions in the first year. This tab will be used when you roll the model forward. So this is a demonstration of how to use it for 30 June 2021. If you were to use it for 30 June 2022, a new column would open up in the historical. For 2021, you can start to put historical assumptions in. You then need to put in the pre-transitional lease assumptions. So once again, these are still the leases that you transition. You can see we've got 2 leases here. And if I go to the at-market lease transition model, we transition 2 leases. So you bring in the same assumptions. You bring in the start dates the same, the terms the same. This is different, and I'll come back to that. But the annual increase is the same, the increase month, the fit out, the make good, the borrowing rates, etc. are all the same. What's critically important here is that you update these 2 lease payments. These are currently a formula, and refer to the calculation tab in the transition spreadsheet. But the theory here is if you look at the top, these are lease payments in 2021, so in the financial year 2021. So this payment needs to be the payment on effectively July 2020, which is the first month in the 2021 financial year. So a common mistake is for people to take the 13,000 and the 10,000. Now those entries were actually in 2019. They then had a couple of years of increases. So where you need to go is across to the calculations tab And you can see in the calculations tab that over here for the first lease, the payments in July 2020, which is the start of the 2021 financial year we're transitioning, were $14,061 a month for lease 1, or $11,025 a month for lease 2. So they're the entries that are put into these two amounts to then roll the model forward. Now, once you've done that, you set up all what your transitional entries were. You can then put in new leases. So as I said, we're doing this for the 30 June 2021 year. We've got a new lease started in that financial year, started on 1 July 2020, 60-month term. The payments per month at the start of the financial year were $10,400. It's got a 5% increase occurring in July, fit outs, options, etc. Now that is basically the only entries you need to put in to then drive the lease calculator model. Where you would go after that is to this FS Journals tab. The FS Journals tab has individual entries for each of the leases you've imported. Now this is a 10 lease model. So the first 10 leases you'll see are actually the transitional leases. So this is brought in 19 and 20, the transitional journals that you've posted in the user tab across here where you put in the imported FS journals. That brings those in. So it brings it in for the first lease, and then we're actually doing 2021. So if you have a look there, it's got journal entries, and the journal entries start from here, and it'll tell you what journal entries need to be posted for depreciation or leasehold improvement, amortization, lease liabilities, bank, interest expense, etc. And that does that lease by lease. So that's the first lease, and this is the second lease. Now they're both leases that we've transitioned. Because this is a lockdown 10 lease model, if you then want to go to the post-transition lease assumptions, they actually start further down. Because as I said, the first 10 leases here are equipped for transitional leases. So if you go to about row 400, you'll see the first of the post-transitional leases. Now, when we imported that, it started on 1 July 2020. And you'll see here that all the entries start in 2021 for this lease. And it will actually create a right of use asset, leasehold improvements, lease liabilities, etc. Please be aware that the lease liability is the total journal entry for the entire year. So that's not the opening lease liability number. That is obviously factored in 12 months of payments, 12 months of lease liability expense, and that's the overall impact, not individual entries, opening, movements for the period, etc. So you can look at all those on an individual lease basis, or if you want to look at them from a consolidated point of view and do one entry, you can go to the consolidated FS Journals tab. Once again, we're in 2021. This is where you would want to look. You can see the income statement, balance sheet, and journal entries for all those leases that you've either transitioned or the new leases that you've actually put in. That concludes this demonstration, and I wish you well for using the model.